Okay, and welcome to an actual play of Vergence, the tabletop role-playing game of dimensional conflict and family drama. A little bit about Vergence. It's a little harder to explain than just, medieval fantasy elf game Go. Uh, so Vergence is in the genre of kind of dimensional fantasy. It's a multiverse in which there are infinite universes, and there are a small number of people who can travel from one, who have the power to travel among these universes and go places they want to. They are each associated with a noble bloodline family that has been bred for this ability. So the game is about engaging with those families and other power centers. Um, there are several power centers called vergences that these noble families are built around. So that's the basic premise of the game. We'll go into lots more detail as we go along. But I thought that what we could do is introduce people's characters. We have some players and characters. We have some wonderful players for this game, and I thought each of you could briefly introduce yourself and then talk a little bit about your character and the vergence that they, or the bloodline that they are from. And how about we go? I'm just going to go by the order that's on the Twitch stream screen. So, Travis, how about you start?
Yeah. So I'm Travis. Hi, how's it going? I've been helping playtest this game, and I do plenty of other TTRPG related, like creation and or fiddling around. Um, and I am bringing a character to this actual play that is named Hawthorne. Um, and she is a kind of medium build, athletic, uh, very much in the vein of like traditional rangers. She's got uh, very lean kind of like armors on, uh, kind of sometimes a little bit flowy clothes that kind of blow in the wind a little bit. Um, and she is from the Vergence called the Maelstrom, which is a world of storms and just like air and power revolving around that. Very notably, the Vergence of Maelstrom, doesn't have solid land or like a base of solid land, but rather like floating islands and ships that are controlled by magical powers that keep them all afloat. Um, so she's very adept at getting around, very used to navigating treacherous terrains, and also happens to be very skilled at ranged combat. She has a number of ranged weapons that she has on her at all times, and some of them vary depending on where we go, on how effective or unique they might be. Um, and yeah, I think that's good.
Okay, cool.
Well,
Thanks. I'm gonna go to Kirsten.
okay, so mine is, and Angel is now helping. That's awesome. Thank you, Doug. Okay, so mine is a character named Micah, who is a character that was originally lost. So originally did not know, was not raised in a family uh, of virgins, but was it's actually kind of out in the world and always seemed to have certain abilities that just seemed to be instinctive, seemed to be natural, was always very, very lucky. And then one day was discovered by a traveling merchant, and she is one of the long lost daughters of the royal family. Um, from the caverns of Agaros. So Agaros is steampunk, underground, pneumatic trains, all the coolness. Very, very good. In order to become part of Agaros, all the power centers, when you want to fully embrace your powers, you dive into the center of the power, which means that she took a swan dive into the sun that controls Agaros, and it destroyed her and rebuilt her with her full power set. So she is now um, fully in tuned with these powers that she always thought were just sort of, how the world works, and is struggling. And that's her. Oh, and I'm Kirsten, David's wife. I'm also one of the playtesters. Hi.
Hi. What does Micah look like?
Micah is she's about 5'2". She is this tiny little blonde with kind of sparkly eyes, and is she's a she's built a little bit like a gymnast. She's essentially Reese Witherspoon from Legally Blonde. She's tiny, she's cute. She is just one of those sort of bright-eyed where you think there's not a brain in her head, but there might be. You should probably watch out. So she's that.
Okay, we will play to find that out.
Yes.
Cool, thank you. All right, and last but not least, we have Jared.
Hi everyone, my name's Jared. I've also been playtesting this game for quite a while. I've managed to get the rules changed twice because I found a way to
So
blatantly
proud.
until something had to be changed. I will be playing
What play
another
testing
lost.
is for?
Exactly. I will actually not be from any of the major bloodlines. As kind of was what previous mentioned, is there are some characters that are presumed to be somehow originally from the bloodlines, but just somehow, were born elsewhere. I'm playing one of the Lost, Titus Maximus Damocles. He has a bunch of other titles, which I will sprinkle in throughout the game, I'm sure. Um, but he's lost, or at least that's probably how he's thought of. He thinks of himself as always existing since time immemorial, and he can't die, and that's kind of the neat thing there.
Well,
Uh,
he can die. He just doesn't stay dead.
Death isn't permanent. It really isn't death. It's just sleep.
Um,
Uh,
mostly dead. He's an
so he's
ex-parrot.
so he's referred to as a conqueror. I don't think he's fully conquered any worlds. I think he's done the conquering part, but not held. So master warrior, trained from birth at this kind of shadowy monastery in a place called Cornin. Making sure I have that right.
Mhm. Yes.
Yes, Cornin, where there's these like rapid winds and shadows that like flay your skin away from your flesh and all that. So really kind of trained in battle and iron discipline and all that. Um, so he should be a fun, well-rounded human being. In terms of how he looks, he doesn't like to wear a lot of clothing because that's displaying weakness and fear. I think he wears enough to cover the bits because this is a family friendly game and show. So I think kind of that Roman gladiator esque kind of pleated skirt or loincloth ish thing. But otherwise he looks kind of like Giga Chad. Essentially just super square jaw, lightly stubbled, short cropped hair, ridiculous looking body, V tapered, all edges and lines. Looks a little bit photoshopped, almost is approaching that uncanny valley for what a person should look like.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Awesome. And just to be clear, you could have chosen to take the ability that would say that you're the Emperor of 1,000 worlds, but you didn't pick that one.
Nah,
Uh, nah, not
He'll
worth it.
never.
So much trouble.
it might
Um,
it might come in later. Who knows? Maybe we
yeah,
buy
yeah.
some.
You could always build that in. Maybe that'll be the end state for your character as we
Ooh,
fade into the sunset.
We
ooh,
should
yeah.
explain the last Vergence, though.
Hmm?
We
Hmm?
should talk about the serpent briefly.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
no, well, there's more to talk about. But I realized that I didn't actually introduce myself. I just said hi. So I'm David. I'll be the GM for this game. I'm also the designer of Vergence. You can find a copy on itch.io if you're interested. It's currently sort of in development. We've been, gradually adjusting it and dropping changes to the system, but it is in an advanced stage of development, pretty much done. Um, so if you were to take a look at itch, you'd get a fully workable, playable game that we are attempting to demonstrate and showcase with this actual play. So a little bit more about the multiverse, as we've said, and as Kirsten mentioned, there are three vergences. These are the great centers of power within the multiverse. We've talked about a couple of them, the Maelstrom and Agoros, the Caverns of Agoros. Two of the characters are from there. The third one, we didn't happen to have any characters from there. There are, certainly playable characters in the game from there. Is the Serpent. The Serpent is a a, a creature. It's 1,000 miles long, and it slithers slowly through uh, what's called the Umbra, the multiverse of infinite worlds. Um, and people live on the serpent and they live in the serpent. They burrow into its flesh, they dig into its bones, they swim through its blood, and they also live on top of it. And the people on the surface need to adapt to changes because the serpent travels from world to world, and the conditions in those worlds can change from place to place. So those are the three vergences. There are infinite worlds to explore and discover and essentially create in the context of the game. There are also other kinds of empowered places that are not so great as the vergences. These are called anchors. One of them is was mentioned by Jared as being a place that his character spent a lot of time in, the Cornin Monastery. There are lots of others within the game that can be played out. In terms of the game system, this is a tabletop role playing game. It is based on the Forged in the Dark system, written by John Harper, originally used in the game Blades in the Dark, but also a bunch of other large scale published games. There's a new one coming out called Girl by Moonlight. Band of Blades, Scum and Villainy are some big ones, but there are also a number of indie games based on this system. Vergence is one of those. So this is a very driven, collaborative storytelling system. We will showcase that. If you're familiar with Forged in the Dark, there will be some differences here and there between standard Forged in the Dark and how Vergence works. The game has really been adapted to a cinematic kind of play style with very, very powerful characters. Each of these characters that we just introduced is one of the most powerful people in the multiverse because they have these powerful abilities, cosmic powers to literally create and destroy worlds. Um, and the game is designed to reflect that. So it's a power fantasy game in which each character can really do a lot. You're not starting as a level zero dirt farmer. You are, one of the great powers of the multiverse. But of course, you also have very powerful opposition and very powerful people that you're engaged with.
But they're
So
all
again,
bad.
um,
They're all
well, they're
bad.
not all bad,
No, they're
but some of
against us. They're all bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, some of them are pretty friendly. Um, so your characters are connected to bloodlines. That's where you get the power, is it's an inherited thing. And so there are these noble families ruling each of the Vergences, and there's several hundred people with the power in each of these Vergences, and also millions of people who do not have the power but live there. And you are kind of automatically caught up in the family and political dynamics of this multiverse. Even if you don't want to have anything to do with that, it will come and find you. So uh, that's kind of
It's
the
like your
premise
worst
of the game.
Thanksgiving ever.
Yes, Thanksgivings are very, very interesting, I'm sure.
Oh,
Or
sorry.
the
That's an
local,
American holiday. So your
yeah,
worst holiday with family ever. Yeah.
local holiday equivalents. The game does mention some holidays in the different vergences. Anyway, so that's a summary of how things work. Um, when we create a game of Vergence, we create characters and we also select a challenge. The standard game has 8 challenges, and challenges are designed to give a reason for the characters to come together. These are incredibly powerful characters. They don't naturally have to be together or band together. So selecting a challenge tells you, why these people are together, why they trust each other, what they are trying to do. So this is a role-playing game that very affirmatively has you identify what you're going to be doing in the game. Uh, a challenge is not a pre-made scenario where the game tells you what scenes you're going to be in and what characters you're going to engage with, but it is a structure for setup and activity and advancement and resources that you have available. This group has decided to play the expedition challenge. So this challenge is about a journey to a place. That place is called Ilium, and in the history of this multiverse, Ilium used to be a Vergence. It used to be a great and powerful place with a great and powerful bloodline, and it became an empire and essentially pissed off everybody else. And there was a long, terrible, incredibly destructive war thousands of years ago, and Ilium was destroyed. It was broken down. Its bloodline is extinct. Um, its center that everyone there drew power from, the great obelisk, was broken, and it was abandoned. It has been surrounded by a magical barrier preventing people from going there for thousands of years. It's been a forbidden place. Um, and but recently, there has been a change. There has been a harmonic in the power emanating across the Umbra. Anyone with the power can feel it, especially in the general vicinity of Ilium, but all across the Umbra you can feel that. And something is wrong, and it's coming from Ilium. So an expedition is being put together to go and find out what's happening in Ilium. And all of the player characters have been invited to join this expedition for one reason or another. So that's the scenario that we're going to play out. The game doesn't prescribe exactly how that's going to play out. We don't actually know what's going to happen, but that's how we're going to make that work. Um, the way the game works is all of the player characters have a set of contacts that they've selected, and the players actually establish which major NPCs are joining the expedition. So they each pick a character from their contact list to be on the expedition. The GM picks one of those to be the leader of the expedition, and we run from that. So we automatically have connections among the players and the NPCs who are going to be involved here. So that is I know that went a little long, but that's kind of what you need to understand to get about what's going on here. And we're gonna start play. So
Heck yeah.
you have all been invited or asked to participate in this expedition. You have some idea of what the history of Ilium is. There are epic poems and histories and fragmented information from those thousands of years ago. So you have some idea of what this entails. You could have done some research since then, and we can always flash back to research or not bother with that. That's all just silliness.
Nerds.
Uh, uh, what's up, nerds? Um, you can play that. You can decide that for yourselves. But we are forming the expedition. The leader of the expedition is Kyneth. She is the Duchess of Tresol in the caverns of Agoros. She's a powerful character. She runs a trading empire that extends out through the Agorian penumbra of multiple worlds in the vicinity of Agoros and out into Agoros. She runs companies and military forces. She is a powerful force. She is not the ruler of Agoros, but she's very powerful.
And Mike is
And
rolling her eyes, going, "Yeah, we know, we know.
whatever.
She's
Um,
all that."
and you have been invited to join this expedition. It is forming up uh, in a world near Agoros. So every world, every Vergence has worlds around it, and the way the Umbra is set up is that worlds that are similar to each other are next to each other, and if you travel through the Umbra, you're traveling, from to a world that's very close to what you're in, to one that's a little different and a little different and a little different, and if you keep going, you can go to pretty much anywhere you can imagine. Uh, so this world is next to Agoros, and it is a great trading hub. Because it's next to Agoros, it is physically similar to Agoros. So it's another underground world of great caverns. Um, in this case, it's a world of a long vertical cavern, hundreds of miles long. So there are tall cliff faces. Uh, that train lines are dug into, and you see many trains forming up. They're coming and going. Agoros has a great trading empire extending out through the Umbra, and so there are trains powered by steam from the orb of Agoros. It has magical properties that allow it to power trains and mechanical creatures and all sorts of steampunky things. Um, there are caves dug into the cliff face of this place, and elevators running up and down the sides of it. So let's decide where each of you is at the start of this. You could be already arrived there. You could be traveling there. There are pathways and roadways that have been created through the Umbra for convenience of travel. Normally, only characters of the blood, empowered Vergence characters can just freely travel through the Umbra, but they can create pathways that the unempowered are able to follow, and also for their own convenience. So you could have been traveling here on one of those pathways from one of the other Vergences or from someplace out in the Umbra. You could already be here. So let's figure that out.
Yeah, I have an idea if
Okay,
I mean,
cool. If you want to start, that's great.
yeah. So to take control of the camera here real quick, I think it kind of has the overview of this kind of vertical wall, and the elevators kind of shifting up and down, and trains kind of popping in and out of these holes, and it starts to zoom in on that kind of tiny figure, and it gets closer and closer, and it's Titus, um, kind of a cloth sack, or kind of one of those festival backpacks, with just the sack with the two strings kind of wrapped around, and he's just climbing up that sheer kind of vertical cliff rather than take any of those elevators because he's like
Because
that
he's Titus.
because he's Titus. And yeah, so it's a full on like bodybuilder, whatever muscle commercial. You see all the flexing, glistening sweat, all that muscles and all that. Yeah, and you know. The wherever the staging area is for this kind of expedition, fingertips kind of pop over the edge, and he pulls himself up. That title screen, Titus Maximus Damocles, first of his name, um, pops up on underneath him.
Cool. I think while you were climbing, you had several instances of people actually trying to rescue you because they thought you were in trouble.
Stop! I'm
I
good.
remember. I think there's a whole system of helping people who get stuck on the cliff face, and
Stop
so
helping me.
Yeah,
and
there's
so
actually
you waved them off.
some mechanicals that keep traveling down, going, "Shh, sir, may I help you? May I help
Are
you?
you in
Hello?"
need of words.
Arian, you need of
I like
assistance?
the idea of those mechanicals. We see him take off the backpack, open it up, and dump out like some mechanical parts of like the occasional one he's smashed and like thrown in
Yeah.
his back.
Well, one of them
And,
got too close, and then
yeah,
he,
Exactly.
and
he hit it with his
eventually
mighty fist.
they've learned to leave you alone while you climbed up, I think, like 3 miles of cliff face.
Hmm.
Straight up, yeah.
And you're barely breaking a sweat.
Great assist. Warmed
Uh,
up for this expedition.
yes.
Took
So
3 days.
I had managed to forget the name of this world. It's called Terminus,
Ah, yes.
uh, and it is the main kind of shipping terminal and entrance to Agoros out into the greater Umbra. And so there are train lines heading out onto into the Umbra, out to the greatest of the roadways through the multiverse called the Great Tormillion Way, which runs from Agoros to the Maelstrom and also into many other places. All right, so you climb up and over, and there is a great train. So the invitation that you were sent said that the expedition will be starting out on this train. It won't be able to travel via train the entire way because eventually the physical laws of the worlds that you'll be traveling to will make it impossible for this to work. But for a good chunk of the way, you're going to be starting out and running on this train. It's like a triple decker train of multiple train cars. It is run by steam powered by the orb of Agoros, and there are many people kind of loading the train, moving in and out. There are troops, there are clockwork soldiers moving around who seem to be guarding this expedition and bouncing around. So we'll leave you having climbed up and seeing this train. Um, who wants to go next?
I can go. Um,
Okay.
so I think my character has already been here, kind of getting ready, um, and maybe on the same like cliff ledge that Titus has dragged himself up onto. You can see my character is kneeling over, kind of like almost it might look like a market stall. There's like a bunch of stuff laid out on the ground with canvas like packs underneath it. And I'm kind of like taking inventory and counting a bunch of stuff. And there's another character uh, standing beside me that I'm kind of like conferring with and making sure we're not missing any gear or that we will be well equipped for whatever travels we have. Um, and the other character is also a Maelstrom denizen uh, who has been sent with me as part of this expedition, um, kind of like an assistant to me. Um, so I'm just going over stuff with her, and I'm like, all right, Ravi, we need to make sure that there's enough rope and I guess some of these things to put into the stone. There's probably going to be more earth wherever we go. And just kind of like looking over all of this stuff before I kind of like get up and turn to see Titus pulling himself up and emptying a sack of
Hmm.
mechanical parts.
Yep.
Cool.
So, so Mike is actually sitting on a chair at the top of the cliff and has a little sunshade, just like Keely from Firefly, just twirling it. And she has a little bag next to her, has a little book, and knew full well that this is exactly what was going to be happening is he was going to be climbing the cliff. So as he starts coming over the cliff, she just reaches down and gets this water bottle and set of snacks and just sets it right there and keeps reading her book because, she figures you probably parched. You need something.
Mhm. I think
I
just as you hold up your little shade, um,
Mm-hmm.
I think it rains here sometimes, and up from above the clouds above the at the top of the cavern, and just as you hold this up, it rains, and none of the rain gets on you. Other people get wet.
Yeah.
You see a couple of people who are like hawking food from stalls and stuff like that, curse and move their stalls inward away from the where it's rainy, but you are completely dry and comfortable.
Yep.
Things just work out that way for you.
You know, people don't understand how to pack. I mean, if they
Yeah.
packed the right things, they'd be dry.
Hmm.
So do
Yeah.
we want to like point out why that is and kind of the rule stuff behind it, or
Sure.
if they
Everybody has selected from a list of special abilities, things that their character can do that allow them to do special things or break the rules in special ways. Um, each of you selected a particular play sheet. So when you're creating a character, you pick your bloodline. You're from one of the Vergences or you're one of the Lost, and then you pick a particular play sheet. Um, and Micah is an explorer. That's one of the Agorian play sheets, and you
So
have.
why don't I explain my power
Yep,
set?
I was going to let you do that. So
Okay.
you have some abilities.
Perfect. So the core power that you have just from being from Agaros is Firewalker, which is you've been incinerated by the orb of Agaros. When you manifest, your eyes glow and you radiate heat and light. But because Micah is formerly lost and kind of had traces of this power, not at the fold that she does now, but she's always had this power instinctively, and it doesn't make a lot of sense that she would just be glowing because certain worlds would, find that to be a little concerning. She's also had always had this ability which is called subtlety, and you can use the power without any outward signs. So if you don't want the power to be noticed, it kind of is invisible. The main power that she has right now is something called tangential convenience, which is she unconsciously uses the power to have a little reality warping field around her, which means that she gets the benefit of environment. She gets things just kind of happen a little bit better, a little bit luckier. And once she was brought to Agaros and was introduced to the royal family and went through the trials, she came out and her powers were, solidified. So instead of being something that occasionally happened, it's now something she feels, in her body and she can have some control over.
Cool.
So that's where she is.
That's a neat one. I think of it as if you could drive through New York City during rush hour and you would hit every green light and
Yep.
you would find a parking space right in front of the place where you want to be, and everything just breaks your way. You get to
Until it
pick,
doesn't.
uh, well, I mean, we'll see how it plays out when you're
yeah.
up against powerful characters. It doesn't always quite work out because they're working against you, but in general, you get the benefit of the doubt with anything related to just being lucky without even having to make a die roll in the game. The game allows you to choose three special abilities. You've chosen two. The game explicitly says that when you're creating a character, you can leave some things undefined because you're not quite sure. There's a lot of choices to make. So you have one that you can pick later on and just have later on. Doesn't mean that you suddenly
Yeah.
gain this ability. It's basically you're just revealing something that you could do all along but haven't chosen to do yet.
So let me explain why I haven't picked that one, because I want to see in the course of play what happens. And there's an ability called network, and you have informants over a network extending through many anchors. I think that's one that could be very useful for her, but she also might be smooth talker, which is talking her way out of more confrontations than she can count. She might also have survivor, which is defense from harm against environment. So it kind of depends on the course of play as to what ability is going to be sort of showing up as her new power set.
Mhm. And the game
Yeah.
explicitly says that's perfectly fine to do that and discover your character in play a little bit. So
Yep.
that's awesome.
So that's her.
Um, cool. Um,
Heck yeah.
all right. Uh, do you other two want to go over your special abilities at this point and let us know what your characters can do, at least so far as
Yeah.
you've created?
Um, yeah, so I think Titus, just to kind of quick go into his, um, he is a conqueror, which I mentioned before, which is one of the lost playbooks. Um, he is mighty, which means he can do some really really cool tough guy stuff. Basically, when he pushes himself, and that'll come up I think during play. Resilient, which means he's incredibly tough and can ignore being injured a lot of times. And the most important one, which is kind of defining the character a little bit, which is Slain, which is my new favorite. He's been dead before, possibly more than once. It's not so bad. He doesn't die permanently. He comes back. It's okay. He comes back with some harm. He some stuff changes about him, but he's good. Ain't no
Hmm.
thing.
And
Cool.
he's been
So
modified over time because when he comes back, he's slowly changing and he doesn't notice it. But those of us who've traveled with him have noticed it.
yeah,
So
he started out as a really skinny little nerd, but
I imagine, yeah, he
he was a
adapts.
little, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, yeah, easy. Yeah. We'll go into those changes, especially because I'm sure he's going to die at least at some point during play with how I play my characters. So.
So just picture,
we'll see how that plays out. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, Travis.
Yeah. And so I have Hawthorne, as mentioned before. Um, she's kind of like a rangery character, and as far as the playbook goes, I've chosen a playbook from the Maelstrom called the Storm Knight. So it is an order of kind of like militant or like well-trained warriors. And specifically for Hawthorne, the ability I've selected from this playbook is called Deadshot, which makes her an exemplar among even the powered people as far as like using ranged weapons. I can be proficient with any kind of ranged weapon I find. I can do things that other people would find nearly impossible. Potentially dumb stuff like curving bullets or whatever I need to do. Um, and it's just an interesting kind of thing. That's the only one that I've actually selected as of right now, mostly just because there is a lot of options, and while 3 starting abilities is a lot more than Blades in the Dark, uh, you still always want more.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah, there's
I
always
kind of have
cool
it in
stuff.
the air. I didn't want to make
Hmm.
my character too combat focused just because uh, I don't necessarily know that we're going to be fighting a war in this game. So I didn't want to dump all my abilities into like being good with
Hmm.
guns if that wasn't very relevant.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. The challenge that you've selected is sort of Indiana Jonesy, maybe. We'll see how it plays out, but and certainly uh, Indiana Jones did some fighting, but did some other stuff too. So we'll see how that plays out. Um, and the game will let you adapt your character during play to that as we go. All right, so the three of you have now met up. You also have some folks with you. We've already introduced Ravi, who is a wanderer through the storm. She is not an empowered bloodline character, but that doesn't mean she's not capable and competent. She's good at reconnaissance and exploration. Um, you also have selected to have um, a contingent of troops. So when
Yes.
you set up the game, you create your group and what resources you have available. You actually decided to expand their scope from having about 20 of them to having about 100 of them. So you have a, a force, a military force. Can you tell us about them and where they are and what you're doing with them? Because
Ooh.
you've got 100 troops that
Oh
you
yeah,
are under your
that's a
command.
Jared question.
So, As mentioned before, there's Vergences, which are like our big cities, and then we have something referred to as an anchor, which is it's like your towns in terms of interdimensional travel. Um, and one of the more interesting anchors is something known as the Legion, which is like the Serpent, a kind of traveling anchor. It's a company that could be as few as 10 at some times, as high as thousands to however many at other times. It's kind of a fluctuating mercenary fighting force, and we decided, since we're going on this expedition, we've been either we hired or somehow kind of attained the use of a contingent, a century from the Legion, so roughly 100 dudes, um, of them. So I view them as probably vaguely Romanesque. I'm sure they change, uh, depending on what world they're in a little bit and all that. But yeah, so that's kind of
Yeah,
cool.
my favorite part of the whole expedition is on part of the train. There's actually a setup where there's a balloon attached at the top that when we get closer and closer to the maelstrom, it comes out and starts to inflate as the train starts morphing into those steampunk dirigibles.
Ooh, that's cool.
So it actually has, components to help it do that. So
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm,
Yeah.
you know,
So one
I'm
of the things
enjoying
about this
the
game
possibilities.
is
Yeah.
that you can establish a lot of things for yourself. The game doesn't have a comprehensive equipment system. There are ways to have specially empowered artifacts and things, but for the most part, because you're a character who can go anywhere you want and get anything you want, money is meaningless to you. You could go get a stack of $1 trillion if you want, and
Yeah.
go to another world where it's just pieces of paper. You can get jewels and gold and anything you want in terms of wealth. You can get any objects you want. So, in general, we don't lean into equipment. You can declare that you have stuff with you, anything reasonable, you just have. And same with your, characters that are directly under your control. So I like that that uh, the century of troops that you have from the Legion is kind of Romanesque. I'm sort of visualizing, Roman legionaries with battle rifles or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Equipment.
Potentially
Cool.
the shield's still, and the shields like can turn into like a mount for rifles or something too,
Okay,
or like a
yeah.
I
stand.
like it. What I was so the reason I was thinking about the train was because with the mercenary force, what's not common in a lot of games, which is pretty common in all of our worlds, is that because we're powered, we can change our clothing and whatever, but the people who come with us are going to need support. So we actually have more seamstresses on this train than the average game because we have an entire set that their job is to like modify things as we go so that our troops do not end up in completely the wrong clothing when we get to a
Mhm.
different world. So
No such thing as if you don't wear clothing, you never have to worry about being in the
yeah,
wrong.
so
There's
that's
that.
one of the reasons why yours. But yeah, we have a mighty team of leather workers and seamstresses.
Cool. So you had let the expedition organizers know in advance that you were going to be bringing this troop. You were going
Yeah.
to contribute this contingent to the expedition, and they have their own couple of cars assigned. There are people walking back and forth, telling people where they should be set up. You have specific quarters that you've been assigned to in a particular car. Um, and so there are quartermasters who are this, they have clipboards walking up and down along the side of the car, telling people they're in the wrong place and where they're supposed to go, how they're supposed to stow their stuff. And let's say the leader of your century is currently in an argument with a quartermaster about how much equipment they have and their overload and where they're going to put their stuff. So that's happening. You could try to go
I'm
sort that
gonna
out if you want to,
Micah
or
drop
not.
over and she trots over to go have a conversation.
What's
Okay.
our centurion's name? I feel like they're going to come up often enough. We should probably name them.
Give him a name.
The
Yeah.
individuals, you mean?
Well, the centurion's the commander.
Okay,
The
okay.
century's the unit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's like centurion. I'm just quick looking up Roman names.
Okay.
Felix.
Sure.
Sure.
Felix. Centurion Felix.
All right, and I'm adding that to the notes there so we don't lose it. So Felix is arguing with a quartermaster. She is insisting that they need to be to set their gear up in such a way that it balances the load. Can't put too much gear at one end of a train car and none at the other end. And Felix is having an argument about how that's gonna make it hard, make it impossible to retrieve that gear quickly enough, and so he wants his stuff set up one way, and the rules for the uh, train arrangement don't allow that, so they're having a fight about that.
Yeah. So Micah goes in and starts smoothing the waters to where, our group brings all sorts of things that are not specifically weaponry and armor.
Mm-hmm.
So things like extra stores of dried fruit and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
that stuff is going to be spread further along the train.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that are grab and go weaponry and armor are going to stay with our people, but we're going to be distributing all of our other things to help balance out the train and make it easier while our group is keeping all of their grab and go weapons because that's what they're here for.
We
Okay,
could
cool.
distribute our troops along the entire train if that is easier.
No, that's
And
not the plan.
okay. And
Every
that's
Uh,
car
one of
could
the
have
suggestions we
10
make is that we could spread the 100 along. And it's
no,
like, if you
because
want, if you,
there are other people on this expedition. There are other military
yes.
forces on this expedition, and they have their own spaces to be. So
Mhm.
this is your assigned car. These are your bunks. This is what you have available. Um, and just to kind of showcase the rule system, why don't we do an action roll uh, to see how well you kind of smooth things over and get things set up? Um,
All
when
right.
the GM calls for an action roll, each player has, or player character rather, has a set of actions or action ratings saying which things you're good at. Each thing can have a rating of 0 to 3, and that rating decides how many dice you have to roll when you're making when you're doing an action.
Where
Um,
are we doing the roll? In Discord?
yeah, you can do the roll in Discord because Travis is running the connection. We'll have to make rolls for him, but you can just open up chat and
Okay.
use the dice spot. So
Yep.
you decide which of your actions applies to this uh, action roll. How are you, and that defines basically how you're attempting to overcome this problem. The GM then tells you what the stakes of the roll are, and we figure that out. Um,
overpower. No.
uh,
So I
No, no.
have Persuade. I have a
yep,
dot in Persuade.
that's certainly a
Um,
logical choice here.
so right now, that would be, since that's only one dot.
That would be
Could
one
I
die.
could
There are ways
I
to get
Yeah.
more dice. Other
assist?
other characters can
Yeah.
assist you. You
So
can
I'd
push.
like an assist, please. And can I get an assist from Titus?
Okay.
Yes.
How is Titus helping? I'm
So
curious about
Uh,
that.
I was gonna say, if Mika is the carrot and the nice person smoothing over the waters, Titus is the stick and
there
he's
we
going
go.
to stand next to the Legionnaire and look also big and intimidating and look ready to turn this into combat before we even have left the station if we don't get our way. So Mika's being
Okay.
the reasonable one. Titus is
Yes.
being the 2 meter tall,
Yeah.
stick.
wall
I'm
of
guessing
wall of
that
human.
dynamic will play out more times than just this during the course of this game.
I suspect.
We will
Yeah.
see. So that would give you two dice. I'm going to call this so in this game you establish the stakes, which are the how risky the situation is on a scale from controlled to risky to desperate. I'm going to call this a controlled roll. You're kind of risking your relations with the expedition here. Um, and then you also establish the effect, which you know the thing you're going the amount of what you're going to achieve with this roll. There are different levels of effect. We'll call this one standard. You'll if you succeed, you'll get things set up the way you want them to be.
All right. So I'm actually going to go ahead and mark smooth talker.
Ooh,
Oh, okay,
Um,
heck yeah.
and that gives me +1 die to social interactions,
absolutely
negating
sure.
with hostiles. So I'm now at 3 die.
Yep, that
Um,
is totally reasonable. I'll call it close enough to a hostile situation. So that's three dice
okay.
to roll.
All right.
And
So action roll and
Yep.
then die
I'm gonna mark
and
as stress
3.
because I assisted.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. All right. Here we go. I get a 6.
Cool.
Ooh.
All right. So the way things work in this game, you roll six-sided dice. We're using a dice bot. We could use actual physical uh, square rocks if we wanted to, but in this case, we're using a dice bot. You rolled three dice, and we look at the highest die. That's the one we're interested in. So you form a dice pool, roll the dice, look at the highest one. The other ones don't matter. If you roll a six, you just succeed with just clean success. And that's what you have achieved this time. So you don't have to worry about any consequences or problems. You do a great job smoothing things over. You set things up with uh, the stevedores here and get the load arranged properly. And they are quite happy with the arrangement. Presumably, you're an explorer, so you've done this a bunch of times before. You've
Mm-hmm.
created expeditions out into the Umbra
Oh,
many
yeah.
times. You've balanced loads on ships and skyships and trains and
Mm-hmm.
wagons and the backs of giant beasts. So you know exactly how to do this, and so this is trivial for you to just say, "Oh no, we're just going to put this here. We're going to put this here. We'll make it work. It'll be easy access for the legionaries, and it's all set." So you've smoothed this over nicely. Very good. As that's happening, a what looks like a higher level functionary wearing a fancier uniform arrives, introduces himself as uh, uh, Delius. He is the Duchess's major domo, and he is in welcomes you all to the expedition. Tells you he and the Duchess are pleased that you have arrived on time. She is very thankful for that, and lets you know that this evening at 7 o'clock you are invited to dine in her car, and afterward there will be a short planning meeting. Meanwhile, and that's a couple hours from now. You'll have time to get yourself settled into your quarters in your cars, um, and do anything else you want to, or we could jump ahead to that if you don't have anything remarkable that you
So
want to get done.
I would like for Micah to grab Titus's arm and take him to the area where the seamstresses are and have them make something he's willing to wear to this dinner,
See,
because
Mm.
him showing up looking like Conan is not going to work.
Pair of
all
socks.
right, well, we'll see this. Technically, you could try a persuade roll with another player character, and then, of
Yes.
course, that's not mind control, but you could, just use that as a way of helping them role play whether they're being influenced by you or not, or you can just role play your way through this.
I think
would just I would just like to give Titus the option and show him some things that will look, amazing and big and strong. And you know how they get it. My half sister is, she's difficult.
I say so, and this is actually a good time because we're breaking a little bit into character scenes. We all have previous connections between our characters.
Hmm.
Yep.
This is something we came up with before game. It's actually on the character sheet. There's some suggestions, but you can kind of come up with kind of pre-existing reasons why your characters kind of know each other. Me and Mika, Titus and Mika, not me and Mika. I'm not in this game. I'm just playing the character. Titus and Mika, they have a relationship. Titus learned from the general greater Umbra from Mika. He knew there were other worlds. He didn't realize there was like Vergences and all that type stuff. So he kind of learned about that from Mika. And Mika has that Titus and her spent many days kind of traveling through really dangerous parts of the Umbra. They kind of got to know each other. So they've definitely worked together before. I would say,
Yeah.
very friendly relationship. I think Titus is not totally, socially inept. He will reluctantly agree. He actually really shouldn't be socially inept. He does have dots in
Yeah.
persuade and command.
Right.
There we go. He's
So
willing to. He's
he will
willing to.
agree to some clothing made. I will describe it if we get to the dinner proper.
Hmm.
Um, I also wanted to have a moment to also bring in Hawthorne and Titus's background because Titus has an
Yeah.
unfinished duel with Hawthorne. Um, from
He
his
thinks it's
perspective,
Or at
unfinished.
least Titus thinks he does.
it
Yes.
was uh it was to the death, and Titus doesn't feel he's dead. So,
Hawthorne kicked his ass. Just saying.
well, it was a spar. Yeah,
Dude, she kicked your
Hawthorne and
ass.
I
I'm
have
just
sparred a
saying.
few times. So I think Titus is going to kind of approach Hawthorne a little bit aggressively and almost where it looks like he's coming for essentially round whatever it is, and then he'll break into a grin and reach out to do the warrior clasp on the arm.
Yeah, and Hawthorne returns it in kind. I think maybe at the very beginning you can see Hawthorne is like uh, ready to put distance between us. Yeah, or like grab a pistol at my side
Yeah.
um, until you start smirking and she realizes that you're not even. I mean, you not holding weapons doesn't mean you can't murder somebody. But you're not swinging a sword at least at this moment.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, Hawthorne will kind of like shake your hand, maybe pull you into a hug or something like that.
Yeah, like warrior bro hug.
Yeah,
Bro, yeah,
caveman hug.
caveman.
I picture Hawthorne looking a bit like Claudia Black, actually. I'll pull up a picture
Claudia
of her
Black.
and see if that.
I'm not. Okay, potential. But
I want to see
yeah,
if that makes sense to Travis.
Well, I'll check it on break, but
Yeah. Yep.
it'll be interesting to be on the same side for once, Hawthorne.
uh, well, there's been more than one occasion we've worked together, but
Not fair.
certainly uh, I'm sure it will be easier for you.
Though, if you ever want to restart that duel, let me know. I'm ready at any time. Even in my sleep, just go for it. See how far you can get.
Uh, she just
Uh-huh.
kind of pats him on the shoulder and is like, I don't believe that will be necessary. Uh, unless you end up doing anything to endanger this expedition.
Oh, that doesn't sound like him.